Guys, welcome back to the Shannon Show. So today's video is going to be a review of the documentary Killer Inside the Mind of Aaron Hernandez, and this is going to be a spoiler review, so we're going to be discussing the ins and outs of the documentary. Yeah, so as we all basically know, if you've watched it, or you probably have heard of Aaron Hernandez, he was a successful footballer player who was convicted of murder, who killed himself in the prison, and he was also a key suspect in another double homicide, but he was acquitted for that whilst serving life in prison. In terms of whether I think that he did any of the crimes, I think he was definitely heavily involved within the first crime, and if he didn't pull the trigger, I think he was definitely the one to tell whoever to pull the trigger. With the second one, I'm not 100% sure. I'm 90% he did it, and 10% maybe it was his friend. But he was definitely there at the scene of the crime. But let me know what you think in terms of his guilt in the two cases. Do you feel like he's overwhelmingly guilty in both the cases, or just one of them, or is there some doubt? Let me know what you think. So the documentary, it's kind of like a documentary you might have seen before. They've got archive footage, they've got interviews of, friends and loved ones of Aaron and the victim of Odin. There's not really anyone like friends and families from the double homicide. But yeah, so that's kind of the structure of it, and it kind of forms various arguments of the motives or the reasons why Hernandez may or may not have carried specifically Odin's murder or the double homicides. But most of it is kind of centered around Odin's murder. I'm guessing because that was the one which there was an overwhelming amount of evidence pointing towards him, and the only one he was convicted of. So let's talk about the possible motives or reasons. So obviously in the beginning of the documentary, it kind of paints this picture of him coming from this family. He has an immigrant father from Puerto Rico who came to America to have the American dream. He went to high school, he was in the football team, he was the star of the football team, and in the town he was known as that legendary football player. He had two sons, and they were both to follow his footsteps with his football career. And at first it paints for those of you who may not have been as clued up on everything, it paints a pretty good picture of his beginnings of life. He's got structure in his life. His dad's his football coach. He's doing well at football. His friends, the friends that they've got included in there are saying, he was such a nice guy, he was really funny, and, he was never the type of person to bully someone. And obviously, high school, middle school, that would be secondary school here in the UK. Those are prime times, especially people who are from sports teams and stuff like that, or maybe popular or whatever. Those are the people most likely, stereotypically, you expect them to be the bullies, the people picking on people. But people are saying, he wasn't a bully. If you've gone through that stage in your life without being a bully, surely one could assume things would turn out all right for them. But then obviously the narrative quickly changes, and now we learn that his dad was an alcoholic. We learned that he was violent. We learned that he was abusive towards his mother and violent towards his mother. It's quite vague on whether he was abusive to his sons, whether he beat his sons. We're not really sure. They're not really clear on that. But obviously it paints a different picture, because before it was he was the coach. He was hard on his sons, but it was kind of a thing where he was hard on them because he wanted them to be successful. But then it's kind of well, is it now a thing of whether he was way too harsh on them? He had very traditional views and beliefs, and was quite repressive of any type of expression that negated his view on what a man should be or what his son should be, which we'll get into a bit later. All of a sudden it's well, his dad was violent, so it's no surprise that he had a violent streak, or he had violent outbursts. So it's kind of painting the picture of, the family unit was not as strong as it should have been to prevent a killer being made. So yeah, as I was saying, it kind of paints the picture that he had a pretty rough, dysfunctional childhood. Do we feel like that is a good enough reason for him? Do you feel like that may have played a part in him becoming this violent murderer and potentially a violent serial killer? Do we feel like that is a good enough reason or good enough foundation? Because his brother basically had the same upbringing as him, pretty much. And, you know, he has a clean record. He was on the straight and narrow. Did better in terms of behavior than Aaron Hernandez did. But what do you guys think? Do you feel like a rough childhood is enough to the extent of how Aaron Hernandez's childhood was like, is enough to kind of conjure up, is enough to aid or facilitate somebody who might encourage a psychopath to tap into the extreme parts of his personality? You know, in some cases I think it can be, but I don't think that this may have played a part, but I don't think it was one of the biggest parts in terms of, you know, bringing the psychopath out. The next kind of development is his dad dying when he was 16, which is obviously quite young. And it is, you know, 16 is still a pretty key stage of your life, a key stage of development, brain development, you know, maturity development, emotional development. He took that pretty bad because even though his dad was an alcoholic, it was made to kind of seem that they still had a really close relationship and that, you know, his dad was his foundation. All of his friends and, you know, childhood friends that were involved in the documentary basically paint the picture of, you know, his dad's death really badly affecting him and that, you know, something changed in him. On top of his dad dying, his mother moved on quite quickly. And I think it's one of those things where she, you know, the dad was abusing the mother. The mother isn't that sad that her abuser is dead, whilst Aaron may not have seen it that way because he has, you know, that love for his father. And then on top of that, not only has his mother moved on, but his mother has moved on to his cousin's husband, which is, again, it's all messed up when you start messing with family and stuff. So I'm not sure if it was a thing where now, because obviously his cousin Tanya, you know, obviously the person whose husband it is, his cousin Tanya, is very close with Aaron. So I'm not sure if he saw it as like a double portrayal, if it was a thing where they had been having an affair and now they're together and now like two families have kind of been like, you know, ruffled up. So obviously now the husband has now come to live in the house. He's sleeping in, you know, the bedroom that his parents used to share, and he's not really liking it. So he spends most of his time at Tanya's house. And Tanya is kind of involved with some booky people. And it, you know, introduces him to, you know, some thugs. And, you know, he had taken drugs before, but I feel like this is the point maybe where his drug use may have been elevated, where it wasn't just every once in a while. It's like marijuana use wasn't just once in a while. It was more like every day and more than once a day. This could all just be conjured up as, you know, a teenager. He's just lost his father who's really close with. His mum's moved on straight away. Maybe he's just kind of going off the rails. Now, I'm not sure who is at fault here, whether we should be pointing fingers at the mother, because I feel like surely the mother must know what her son is doing and what her son is getting involved in. And I'm just kind of thinking, if Tanya was hanging around with criminals, surely the husband was as well. So I'm just thinking, so the husband is probably not much of a father figure anyway. Even if Aaron was to, you know, even if Aaron was to get to the point where he accepted their relationship and wanted to move back home, do you think the mother is at fault here for not trying to reconcile with Aaron as well as she should have, or like seek counselling or something like that? Because I didn't really hear anything about somebody seeking counselling. People just say that he changed, but it was just the kind of thing where they've accepted that he's changed rather than try and help him. Do you feel like that was anyone's responsibility to help him at this point where he's now clearly acting out? I think it was someone's responsibility, and I'm kind of looking at the mother like, she should have taken some responsibility there. But what do you guys think? And in terms of, this being a lead up to him being a murderer, I think this is a turning point, definitely. Obviously, because now he's now being introduced to people who were involved in the homicide of Odin. But if he had not met these people, do we feel like he wouldn't have been a murderer? He wouldn't have been a killer? Like, that would have been that. If he had not been, hanging out with and befriending these criminals, do you feel like that just would have been the end of it? His life could have been completely different right now. Let me know what you think. So another key development, which I feel like, they didn't really go into the details of why, but obviously he's kind of a legacy football player. His dad was a football player, his older brother was a football player, and they all went to UConn, but he decided to go to a university in Florida instead and take a scholarship there. And obviously I'm just thinking, if he really cared about his father, if he really respected his father, wouldn't he want to kind of carry on that tradition in his name? I feel like they didn't really go into detail about why he suddenly just did a 360 and decided to go to a whole different college, even though he already had an offer at UConn. I'm not sure if that was shade to his father or not, or whether that was maybe he had thought about his relationship with his father and he realised that it wasn't as rosy as he thought. What do you guys think? As we find out, he goes to the Florida University, he becomes the star athlete on the football team, but he's kind of constantly getting himself into trouble, violent outbursts, he's going into clubs underage, he's getting served, he's not paying bills, he's punching the management, he allegedly shot at someone, but he's managed to get away with all of these things. And the documentary kind of paints a picture of, these college football teams have a lot of power because they generate a lot of money to the city. So therefore they can buy people out of bad situations. So therefore they can buy people out of their bad behavior, and they can buy people out of the consequences of their bad behavior. So perhaps maybe this enables athletes to partake in criminal behavior because they know that they can get away with it. Obviously, with college athletes, notoriously they've been able to get away with a lot of crimes, especially when it's dealt internally within those colleges. Things like assault, sexual assault, we've seen it time and again. People get away with it and then go on to have amazing professional careers and make loads of money. So yeah, do you think that these colleges are complicit in aiding and abetting criminals? Because they're essentially letting them get away with stuff. I think they are. And do you feel like maybe this gave him being able to get away with crimes in the beginning? So we know for sure they helped cover up the assault with the manager. We're not really sure about the alleged shooting, but we know they helped cover up the assault charge. So do you feel like they were complicit in perhaps him progressing to homicides because he just thought because he's this NFL player, because he's this football player, that he's untouchable? Let me know what you think. So then the next development, the coach basically tells him not to come back for the next or the final year on the team. So I'm guessing now that, Aaron has just been getting up to no good and his coach has basically had enough. And I guess there's only kind of two options for him now. It's either, join the NFL or just quit. Obviously the best option is NFL, because obviously if he was to just quit, he probably wouldn't have anything going for him. But one thing I was kind of thinking is, it seems like it was just we're cutting you from the team, like just don't come back, kind of thing. It didn't really sound like they really addressed anything as to say, you've been behaving really badly, so we're cutting you from the team. Do you feel like there should have been some sort of intervention, some kind of warning that said, if you don't get your act together, we're going to cut you from the team? Is there something going on? Should we get you some help? Should we get you a counselor? Because obviously they're quite vague about it. Or do you think it was a thing where they gave him like multiple warnings and he just kept ignoring them, so they had to let him go? What do you think the situation was? And if it was a situation where they were just like, we're cutting you from the team, that's that, do you feel like they should have maybe talked to him about getting some help cleaning up his act? Do you feel like there was some responsibility there? Let me know what you think. So obviously, he's coming up to the NFL draft. He's quite young, 20 years old. And, they've tested him. He's failed the drug test. Obviously, he's just like smoking weed every day. And he scored very low on his social maturity. Because of those things, people are saying, well, if you look at the material, if you look at this, this assessment of him, he probably shouldn't have been drafted for the team. Obviously, he's a really good player. He has a really good natural ability, but he probably shouldn't have been drafted for the team. And then obviously also a recap back to him being like a college football player. It was also kind of said that, the coaches would be doing dodgy practices, so they'd be giving people painkillers for them to play through the pain. And people would just take them because obviously they wanted to play, because they wanted to, because they wanted to play. They didn't want to be sitting on the bench when, people were going to be scouting them. So obviously it's kind of just like, are these colleges complicit? Because, these drugs, they have side effects. These drugs, they have side effects. They could be, addictive. Are the colleges complicit here with, maybe not, making serial killers, but, messing up people psychologically and emotionally? Let me know what you think. So, yeah, if we were looking at, he's got low social maturity, he's failing these drug tests, should the NFL have taken him on or not? Obviously, he did manage to get into the NFL on the 4th draft. Like, I don't watch American football, but I'm guessing that just is like, obviously, you want to get in the first draft or the second draft, and then 4th draft is like worse than the first draft. But yeah, that's what I'm kind of just assuming. He comes in like last for the Patriots. But yeah, should they have allowed him on the team? I feel like they should have. Obviously, he said he was going to commit to like drug tests and stuff like that. And I feel like if he didn't have the team, he wouldn't have much else going for him. Like, football is what he'd been working for the rest of his life. And I feel like without that, I'm not sure if he would have been in a different position, because without that, but then at the same time, without that, he still probably would have been hanging out with the same people. He's already had a taste of that college football life, and that invincibility. So I'm not sure if that would have changed the path of him being a serial killer. I think he definitely did feel like he was a lot more invincible as an NFL player, but I don't necessarily think someone with his profile should have not been drafted. But what do you think? But a lot of people were saying that they didn't want him to, they didn't think that he should have been drafted for the English, for the Patriots, because that would have brought him back to, close proximity to these thugs and these bad people. Yeah, definitely would have been better for him to be drafted somewhere else. But again, they didn't really make it clear whether he had other offers. Because, if you're coming in like 4th draft, last in the 4th draft, you probably don't really have many options. So it's probably the thing where the Patriots was the only option for him. So that's what he was going to take. But if he had like an offer somewhere else, away from these thugs, away from these bad peoples, do you feel like it would have changed his path? Like I keep saying, I don't think it would have, because I just feel like he would have still felt like he was invisible invincible and above the law. And if it wasn't this Odin guy, it probably would have been somebody else. So as we know, he went on to have a pretty successful NFL career, and if he wasn't caught for these murders, he probably would have continued to have a pretty successful NFL career. But as we well know, even with a 40 million 5-year contract with the NFL, he was still hanging around with these thugs. So a lot of people in the documentary were a few people in the documentary were kind of saying, he didn't have his father figure on his life to put him on the straight and narrow. I'm guessing he's around like 20-ish, 21 at this point. Or anyone in his life to tell him to stop hanging out with these thugs and focus on your career. Look how good you have it. Focus on your career. Don't throw it away. I'm just thinking but he fully had his mum was still alive. He had an older brother. He had a wife. I'm just kind of thinking, did nobody kind of tell him okay, because I feel like they all knew. His wife definitely knew, his brother definitely knew, and his mother definitely knew about his double life as a thug. So I don't understand why they didn't pull him to the side and say, you need to stop being stupid. You need to have a serious think about your actions and the consequences that your actions could lead to. And I'm not sure if they tried to tell him and he didn't listen, or whether it's a thing where he's the breadwinner of the family, so nobody kind of wants to step up to him or upset him, or may have tried to say something but didn't really want to, put pressure on it or, stage an intervention. And then, or maybe, they just turned a blind eye to it because, as I said, he's the breadwinner. They might be getting a little something, at one point, he was arguing with his mum on the phone in prison about money, and she was like, I guess, because obviously when he got in prison, his contract was basically just terminated, so he lost all of that £40 million. He lost, and I guess his mum was just like, you kind of fucked it up for us. I could have had £1 million and I would have been set for life, and you just messed that up. So, what do you think it was? Do you feel like people tried to check him, but he wasn't hearing it, or do you feel like people were scared to check him, or people were comfortable turning a blind eye as long as the checks were coming? Another factor kind of played forward as into why Aaron Hernandez was violent, or was a serial killer, or was just a murderer, a single murderer, was his brain injury. He had, I think it's called CPT. Correct me if I got the initials wrong, but I think it's CPT, which is like a brain injury. Most people who get it are people who probably play contact sport, who usually would be susceptible to head injuries. So NFL, rugby, some footballers if you're heading, some footballers /soccer if you're doing headers and stuff, boxing. You see it a lot because of head trauma. And, it's a brain injury that can cause memory loss, can cause impulsive decisions, can cause depression. But I don't really think that was the reason why he would go up to somebody and kill them, where he would, plan a murder or kill someone impulsively in a drive-by. Because the CPT stuff was mostly linked towards suicide. But obviously the topic of suicide, we'll get into that later. And then obviously a big one which a lot of these articles and these news outlets are focusing on, is his sexuality. So we pretty much know, at the very least, he was attracted to men. We're not really sure if he was just fully gay, but he had sexual relationships with men, and he repressed his sexuality pretty much for all of his life. We know that he was abused as a child by a male. So perhaps male, which then also adds other layers to it, because, being gay or, having attraction or same-sex attraction even though we live in a more progressive world, it is still very much stigmatized, especially in families where it is traditional views or highly religious families. It is difficult, and especially when your main job is, you know, an NFL player, which is, you know, a very hyper masculine sport, and a sport where the people who are playing that sport do not view gay people as masculine people. They view them as inherently feminine. And there's a lot of homophobia and a lot of homophobic talk that goes on amongst football players and athletes, like in terms of openly out athletes, male athletes, footballers, NFL footballers. I don't really think there's anyone who is, you know, openly gay in the NFL right now. I feel like, you know, it's always the former players that have come out to say it. So it's very telling of like the culture. So obviously this is something that he repressed throughout his life, and then obviously there's already the stigma there, and then he's been abused by another boy. So then there's this two stigmas. There's just like two stigmas together, and I feel like a lot of the time, when you already view being gay as wrong, and you've been abused by someone of the same gender as you can conflate the feelings of shame together with the abuse and your sexuality. I can definitely understand why he was ashamed of his attraction towards men. I feel like he was ashamed that he enjoyed engaging in sexual activity with other men, because he had basically a sexual relationship with another boy, and it wasn't abusive or anything. So he had a relationship and he enjoyed it, and he was ashamed that he enjoyed it. So it wasn't even just like all of his sexual encounters with men were abusive. He did have relationships that were, you know, they might have been closeted, but they were healthy. And he was ashamed that he enjoyed that. And I feel like because he was in the NFL, obviously he had all of these tattoos, he had all of these muscles, and this is not to say that gay people can't get tattoos and they can't you know, build muscle and they can't be masculine, end of. But for somebody who is ashamed of being gay, one could take those things as him trying to present as overly masculine to overcompensate the fact that he's ashamed that he is gay. He also did partake in, you know, homophobic comments and stuff like that, and, you know, saying homophobic things about, you know, homophobic inmates in prison. And that's another telling side. I've met so many gay people who, before they came out the closet, had been, you know, spreading rumors about people saying, oh, they're a lesbian, oh, they're a gay. Comes out like 5 years later that they're the ones that were actually gay and ashamed about themselves. When we hear phone conversations of him being homophobic and transphobic, those things don't surprise me, because a lot of people do it to join in, to throw the scent off of themselves, because they just feel like they have to hide who they truly are. And I feel like this was a core reason, because I feel like obviously he had very violent outbursts. A lot of it was because of him trying to present as overly masculine. I do think he was potentially involved in that drive-by, and if we were taking that to be fact, he obviously thought, well, these guys are testing me, they're testing my masculinity, I now have to step to that, and I have to do it at an extreme level, because on top of that, he clearly was not well in the head either. The documentary touches on his paranoia, but they don't really link the paranoia. It was more of, you know, people were after me, people know that I killed somebody, but they didn't really touch on the possible paranoia of, you know, people finding out that he was gay. So yeah, I definitely feel like perhaps that was a reaction, his hypermasculinity and his fact that he needed to be respected and he couldn't be disrespected by another man, was a factor in him, you know, killing people to maybe prove himself or to deal with that conflict within himself. I feel like this was one of the bigger factors. Do you feel like that was a big factor, him being repressed and him trying to present as hypermasculine because of the conflicts with his sexuality? Do you feel like that was, you know, a considerable factor in him doing the killings? And do you think it was a motive? Because in terms of motive of him killing Odin, people were saying, did Odin catch him in the act? Did Odin, find out about something? Obviously, there was rumors of him having a gay pen pal. But other than the guy that he went to high school with, nobody really came out and, the alleged gay pen pal, nobody really said that they had slept with him. Maybe he might have seen him watching some gay porn or some stuff like that. Maybe that was what it was. What do you think the motive was? I think maybe did he try it on with Odin because they were getting quite close? What do you think? Did he try it on with Odin and then Odin, wasn't interested, and then he got paranoid? What do you think the motive was, and do you think it was linked to his sexuality? And if he was allowed to just be openly gay or bi or whatever he chooses to identify as, do you feel like that would have stopped him being this killer? What do you think? Again, I don't know, because he was dealing with a lot of issues. Another kind of thing that they kind of just scrape past, I think maybe now because marijuana is like legal now. There's of course there's health benefits to marijuana, but the neighbor and stuff that was living next to him, the neighbor that was living next to him in his secret apartment that the NFL got him, made the distinction that she thought that he was smoking skunk. And obviously there's different strains of marijuana, but it seemed like marijuana. But skunk is very psychoactive, very high concentrated, and can cause paranoia. And I've encountered loads of people who are just smoking skunk every day, and the paranoia and the agitation and the short fuses that they have. I haven't seen any chronic skunk users murder anyone, and I don't know any chronic skunk users who have killed somebody. Violent maybe, but not excessively violent. But could that have been a factor in terms of he was already paranoid anyway? Could that have heightened the paranoia? Could that have heightened the short fuses? Let me know what you think. And also this kind of secret apartment, I'm not sure if the police even investigated that, or even if the secret apartment had ever been investigated. Do you think that, well, obviously by now, if anything, all of the evidence has probably been removed from there, probably from the NFL, who knows? But yeah, do you guys think that potentially at some point that secret apartment held any key evidence? Let me know what you think. And then, of course, a lot of people say, yes, you can take all of these things into account, but at the end of the day, it's all of the decisions that Aaron Hernandez made was up to him. And I feel like, yes, you can take everything into account, but yeah, at the end of the day, I feel like the majority of it, regardless of the things going around him, that was his decision to make. Even though he did have a lot of issues and he was dealing with a lot of stuff emotionally, he knew the difference between right and wrong. And he knew the difference between right and wrong. And even being a psychopath doesn't inherently mean that you are now a serial killer. Obviously, you probably are more susceptible to be a serial killer or a murderer or violent. But it doesn't necessarily mean because you are a psychopath that you are now automatically a murderer. So I feel like, yes, he does need to take some. I feel like, yes, a good chunk of the responsibility should be on Aaron Hernandez. If his life had been a bit different, maybe, of course, it most likely would have been less likely that be the case. But I feel like, of course, yes, it is, stuff is quite emotionally heavy. And at times you do kind of feel sorry for Aaron Hernandez, and you just kind of think like, oh my gosh, he's had such a shit, crazy life. No wonder he's turned up this messed up. But at the same time, he's took the decision to took the decision to be unnecessarily violent and end someone's life and ruin their family's life. So I feel like we all need to take that into account as well. Moving on, kind of discussing Odin's trial. You know, a key thing that is just very wild is the fact that Odin was dating Aaron's fiance's sister. This caused like a split and a rift in their relationship. Like, they were all cool until it was revealed that Aaron was the suspect, and then obviously it was just looking more and more and more like it was him. So they just kind of just stopped speaking to each other. Like they I don't know what their relationship is like now. I don't know what their relationship is like now, but they just stopped speaking to each other. And what do you feel like Shayana was a bad sister for not supporting her sister, especially when it was looking like Aaron did this or was involved in Odin's killing? Do you feel like she was a bad sister? Obviously, I think they had been dating for a year. Odin and the sister had been dating for a year, whilst, you know, they were childhood sweethearts. Had been together around what, five-ish plus years. They had a child together. They were engaged, and she's chosen to stand by him. And now, obviously, they're not speaking. Was Shayana a bad sister for standing by Aaron? And do you think that her standing by Aaron, when it's very clear now that he was at the very least involved and they're at the scene, is a forgivable offense? You know what? I can see why she stood by Aaron. Obviously, he's the breadwinner. All she's got going for herself is the housewife. She's relinquished in that role. So I'm not really sure. It seems like she's quite estranged from her own family. And Aaron is pretty much all that she has. I'm not sure what all she'd really have with her sister maybe would be emotional support at best. But it seems like Aaron is essentially her livelihood. He's the breadwinner. You know, when I was kind of doing extra research, all she basically did was being a housewife. She cooked and she cleaned. She said she knew her role. On top of that, you know, she said that she loved him. You know, I guess she was sticking by him. You know, she's his fiancée. And maybe she thought that her sister would eventually forgive her. But what do you guys think? Obviously, you know, I think that the sister definitely knows that she even helped cover some stuff up. And I think that she knew that he was interested in men. In their conversations that they had when he was being transphobic, she checked him and she was like, they're human beings, like there's nothing wrong with them, kind of thing. So I feel like she knew. You know, in interviews she said she had no idea, but I feel like she did know, but because she was in love with him, she didn't really care. Maybe she just thought, you know, he's bi and I'm cool with that. So what do you think? Who should she have had her allegiances with? Should she have had it with her fiancé and the father of her child, you know, and the person who's going to be taking care of her and her child, or her sister, who was her blood relative? Let me know what you think. But yeah, moving on. Again, everybody in Aaron's circle knew that it was him. His personal assistant knew that it was him. His mother knew that it was him. And his brother probably knew it was him too. And I feel like when they're having their phone calls, they just don't really address it. They're just like, oh, so what's going to happen next? Like, are you going to go away? You know, what charge are they going to put you on? And it was just very casual. It wasn't just like, you know, how could you do this? Like, you know, nobody really addressed it on the phone, which was like, I just feel like it was just very strange. I think the mother tried to. She was just like, you know, the stuff that I'm hearing, it's very difficult. But she never outright says, how could you do that? Even though she fully well knows that he was involved. Anyway, another family member involved, obviously going back to Tanya, she's somehow involved in this. I guess she was apparently like trying to cover up evidence for them. She gets called to the stand. She gets given immunity, but she refuses to testify. So she ain't no snitch. And her and Aaron had a really close relationship, you know, on the phone in the prison. She, you know, she often says, you know, I think of you as my own son. And Aaron just seems very grateful for her not testifying. Again, Tanya's motives. She did have cancer. On the phone, it sounds like she was quite optimistic that she was going to beat it, but she did have cancer and she did have 2 sons. Do you feel like this was generally out of love? Or do you feel like, again, there's an incentive there? I've got 2 sons. I might not make it out here. I know that you do right by them. You'll make sure that they're good. So therefore, I'm not going to testify on you. What do you think it was? I feel like it was half and half. So, moving on, obviously, that trial concludes. He's found guilty. And then he's found guilty. There's another trial. He's found not guilty. And then there's a situation that happens where, you know, he's going to be outed by the media. They said that he's got a gay pen pal. I'm not really sure about the gay pen pal, because I just feel like if somebody who would be making a point to be hypermasculine presenting, to be homophobic over the phone, and probably wants to present as hypermasculine in prison, of all places, in a male prison, I don't think that he would be stupid enough to have a pen pal and a gay pen pal. I just feel like for someone who was trying to be on the DL, why would they want written evidence? Surely they would just find somebody else in the prison to, you know, do their DL stuff with. So I'm not really sure how credible this is. I'm thinking maybe somebody else spilled the dime on him, and this is just, you know, the smoking gun that they needed for him to tell the truth. 2 days after the outing, you know, people are already taking the piss, and it's a thing where I feel like he was quite optimistic he was going to appeal the case. I think maybe he didn't think he was going to get, like, you know, half the sentence off or even beat it, but maybe he just was trying to fight for the possibility of parole, because he got life with no parole. Obviously, what is that, like 20 years before you can get parole? So he'd be out at like 40, 50, 60 even. So at that point, you know, 20 years coming out, being back with his family, yeah, he would have been known as a serial killer. Yeah, he would have been known as a killer. But, you know, he'd still have essentially his legacy and his family. I just feel like with him now, possibility of him being outed, and, you know, he's hearing people already taking the piss, like he knew it was going to be if he had come out before. I feel like he would have rather been known as a serial killer, as a murderer, rather than a gay guy or a bi guy or somebody who sleeps with men. So I just feel like that was one of the factors, yes, because now it's just kind of like when I come out, that's all people are going to be talking about, who's probably like very paranoid, very self-conscious. So I feel like that was, of course, one of the factors, but of course there was other factors. Then obviously it's revealed, obviously at the end, he did have a CPT brain injury, which is, you know, which can cause depression and has been linked to suicide, and other NFL players have, you know, killed themselves. So I guess the argument at the end, because it was obviously this CPT thing and the head trauma, and, you know, athletes are now killing themselves over it. There was a kind of argument of, you know, whether it's the NFL's responsibility, whether people should be discouraged from joining the NFL, or whether the NFL should put in place more safety measures to limit that. I guess the NFL has kind of taken the stance that, you know, they know that the medical evidence is out there and they've taken some measures to try and prevent it, but it doesn't really seem like they have. I think it's just a thing where the NFL and American football just makes so much money, and then it's a thing where, almost like boxing, you know the risks. Like, even though CPT is like a relatively new diagnosis, and, you know, people donating their brains is relatively new, it's it's been kind of like a hush hush secret. Lots of people would say, athletes are like stupid because they're hitting their heads all the time. But, brain injuries hasn't been a secret. Brain injuries and the effects of these brain injuries because of head contact has not been this thing that NFL just never realized until the study came out. They definitely knew. It's definitely been kind of the elephant in the room. Everybody knows it, but nobody really addresses it. It's just kind of like, the game is the game. We're here to make money, and if we die by the sword, we die by the sword. But what do you guys think? Do you feel like there should be extra measures? Do you think there should be extra measures put in to make sure that there is, as less head trauma as possible? Do there need to be some like kind of changes to the rules to allow that? Or do you feel like it's a thing where people are going into the game and they know the risks, and it's up to them to manage that? Because obviously we saw one guy, he had a really promising career, but obviously he either had CPT or he had the beginnings of CPT, and he just thought, even though I'm probably going to have a great career, it's not worth deteriorating my health. So he left. But obviously the guy that he spoke to most likely came from the guy that he spoke to, just looking at him, white male, looks like he comes from a privileged background. He could probably get a job outside the NFL. Most of the NFL are black, people who have come from like working class families. So it's a thing where this is their livelihood. There's not really much prospects outside of it. So it's a thing where, fuck a head injury if me and my family are going to be set for life. A brain injury and deteriorating health is not incentive for somebody who has no other prospects. So it's a thing where I don't think the NFL are going to do anything, and I don't think the players, I don't think the NFL are going to do anything, and I feel like the players are going to be happy to continue playing in the sport if they're making a lot of money. And even with Aaron Hernandez, I feel like even if he found out this brain injury, he probably still would have kept playing because, that was his livelihood as well. So I think that's definitely a factor, as well as his paranoia and anxiety and, an embarrassment as well of being outed. And then obviously another kind of thing was this, the motive of money, because in his suicide note to his fiancée, he says, "You're going to be rich." And obviously he had appealed the murder conviction at this point, and the law in Connecticut at the time was, if the person who appeals their case dies before the appeal is finished, then the conviction automatically gets vacated. And obviously if the conviction was vacated, then the NFL could possibly be liable to release the 40 million to release the money from the terminated contract on the condition, obviously, he was convicted, but he's no longer convicted. So that was definitely a good motive. Maybe he just thought, you know what, I can't take the shame, and 20 years, and then I'm in here for at least 20 years, and that's even if I do get an appeal. My family right now, they're struggling because at this point he's now given his at this point he's now had to sell his home. His assets are dwindling, can't even afford like the upkeep of the mansion anymore, so his funds are dwindling. So maybe he thought if he did this, then at least his family will be set for life. So I feel like that was probably another big factor as well. So yeah, he ends up killing himself. So yeah, even though he's a horrible person, like even though he's a horrible murderer, I don't think it was right for those people to out him. And yeah, I just feel like I don't think it was right for him to be outed like that. And I feel like those people that went on a radio show making fun of him should feel very bad about themselves. And then obviously, we see they introduced an interview from another NFL player who waited until they had retired from the NFL to come out the closet. Well, he basically, was very anxious about it because of the culture of the team. Because of the culture of the team and the culture of the NFL and the culture of the supporters of the NFL. His plan was to, make his money in the NFL and then just commit suicide. And, the suicide rate is still very high for the LGBT community. It's very high for the trans community. It's still very high for... So when people just say horrible and mean things about gay people just to say it, just to be funny, just to have a joke per se, all of these things affect people. And like I said, even though we're living in a progressive society, hate crimes are still going on. There is still internalized stigma, and there's still countries out here there's still countries out here where you can be killed for being gay, and you can be discriminated against for being gay. So yeah, I just think everybody should just be a bit nicer, regardless of your religious views. If it's not love, then just keep it to yourself or keep it in your prayers. The conviction gets vacated, but then Odin's mother takes it to the Supreme Court to get the conviction reinstated and get the law abolished. She's successful in that. And, she says that she forgives Aaron and the perpetrators, because obviously it wasn't just Aaron. He hired some people to do it. He had his other thug friends there with him who also got convicted. And yeah, I think it takes a lot for you to forgive someone. And I feel like she generally did forgive them, because she didn't even file a wrongful death suit or anything like that. So I feel like she truly has forgiven. And yeah, it was just sad seeing her throughout the trial crying. They put her up on the stand. She's been given strict orders not to be emotional. I'm just glad I've never had to go through something like that. Do we think that Aaron is a psychopath? I feel like I'm 60% sure that he is, but then I feel like another part of him, maybe he's just messed up, maybe he's got another personality disorder. But then again, it's just kind of the first trial, he clearly was involved in that murder. He was either the hitman or the person who ordered the hit for the first murder. And he never he just speaks about, on the phone he was just speaking about the case so casually, he was just speaking about the case so casually. He speaking about his decision so casually. It was just kind of to him, it is what it is, but then kind of just it didn't really take into account the severity of his actions. I don't know whether it's just maybe he was dealing with stuff personally within, when he was by himself. But for me, there was definitely something wrong with that guy. I definitely think he knew the difference between right and wrong, but I think there was something definitely wrong with him. But does anyone think that he is 100% a psychopath? But yeah, if he had gotten off of the Odin charge, what do you think would have happened next for him? I don't think he would have had a career with the NFL. I feel like people, obviously we see snippets of people removing his name from everywhere. People are trading in their jerseys. I feel like most of that stuff was happening, before the trial, the verdict had come through, because it was just very clear that he did it. And, lots of people were saying OJ and stuff. And from what my understanding is that OJ didn't go back to the NFL after the murder trial. So, but would he have still had support after if he was to have gotten off that case? And would he have now went on the straight and narrow? I don't think so. I actually feel like prison might have been the best place for him, because I just feel like if he had gotten off the Odin case, I feel like he just would have been sloppy and done something. I feel like him being in prison for that long, waiting for the trial, I'm not sure if that would have been a deterrent for him not to be violent and not to go out looking for trouble. What do you guys think? Do you feel like if he beat that case, he would have now turned his life around, or he would have gone on to make someone else a victim? The documentary also kind of touches on, you know, how when it's like entertainers or notable figures who are on trial, most of the time it kind of overshadows the victim. And, you know, lots of people were going into the trial, like half the court is just packed full of reporters. Half of these people didn't even care about the person who was slain. Media presence, and obviously they've got it televised as well. It just must make the process just so much more harder for the family, because now the media is hounding them down. Every day it's just about Aaron Hernandez rather than the victim. When it's, you know, when the case is rolling, you know, the name is just, you know, it's all about Aaron Hernandez and whether he'll get off the case. It's never, you know, will Odin get justice? And even just like the media, you know, hounding down Odin's family to get a statement, I just feel like it's sick. I just feel like as a journalist, you have no integrity whatsoever if you are going up to a grieving mother's house to get a statement. And then the thirsty reporters that kept asking like the teammates what they thought about the case after they said, you know, we don't want to comment on it. Like, they just kept going and they kept going. I guess now even just the reaction is good enough now for these reporters. They don't even need a statement. Like, the reaction is good enough. And again, I just don't get it. But at the same time, they know nosy ass people will love it. What do you guys think? Do you feel like the media has a right to, you know, go and ask questions, or, you know, be quite forceful or aggressive with the, you know, getting information, going to the suspects' houses, families' houses, going to the victims' families' houses? Or do you feel like there should be some law put in place to ensure people's privacy? Let me know what you think. I think that they should. Yes, most of it is centered around Odin's case, but they do talk about the second case. And it's like literally just by coincidence. Oh, that must have been stress for Aaron Hernandez's lawyers. Like, the police go and find evidence and it's linking him to 2 whole other murders. Obviously he gets off the second case. You know, he had a really good lawyer, and the evidence was pretty much circumstantial, and I feel like the reason why he got off was because, one, evidence was kind of circumstantial. They didn't find the murder weapon. They didn't find any DNA, and then on top of that, the main witness was totally unreliable. He just had such a long rap sheet, and then on top of that, who's to say he had such a long rap sheet and a violent rap sheet as well? Like, he went into a club and just shot at it randomly. Who's to say it wasn't him? And who's to say he isn't trying to pin this on him so that he'd have a narrative and a storyline for his lawsuit that he's trying to put out on Aaron to have more money? So I feel like, yeah, the lawyer did a good case. The lawyer was very smart about the way he went around things. But do you guys feel like that lawyer could have won the first case if he was put on it? I'd have to say no, because the evidence for the first case was just ridiculous. And especially the closing video was just a nail in the coffin, because it's very clear that he was at the scene of the crime. So he was just, if anything, I feel like his thug friends were happy to go down without implicating Aaron. From time he's saying that he wasn't there, he thought that was the best case scenario for him to get 0 time. Because even with him being there, he might still have gotten some time, or they might have still made him like an accessory to a cover up or second degree, you know. But even if he ordered the hit, I found it very weird that he was just there chilling with his child, with these 2 criminal murderers that he just watched, if he didn't pull the trigger, that he watched kill. And they're just playing with the baby. It was, that footage was just very jarring. And that's why I just feel like he was just way too lost in the source. But yeah, in terms of the documentary, obviously it was informative. I haven't watched any other Aaron Hernandez documentaries, but if there's any other Aaron Hernandez documentaries that you'd recommend, let me know in the comments. But yeah, it was informative. I feel like it was good that it was only 3 hours. I feel like it was better they went down that route than stretching it out for 10 hours. But most of it was relaying things that was already public information. And I feel like obviously they couldn't get the access. It's very clear they couldn't get the access. But it would have been a more compelling interview if we had members of his family, or if we had members of the Hernandez family, or Hernandez's relatives, or Odin's relatives, because all of it was just people who knew him rather than relatives. But obviously, I guess they just don't want to be involved with the case, which is understandable. I just feel like a lack of that made it possibly less interesting, obviously, with his sexuality and stuff like that. But overall, it just kind of felt like another kind of documentary where we see archive footage and we see interviews. There wasn't really anything eye-catching about it or special about it, I'd say. It's a decent documentary, so I'd give it a 3 out of 5. Obviously, it's only 3 hours, but I'd probably space it out over 3 days. In terms of like bingeability, I'd probably say it's a 3.5 out of 5 in terms of bingeability. But yeah, let me know what you thought of the documentary. Let me know what you thought about the information included. Did you find out anything new? Is anything surprising to you? What do you think Aaron's motives were? Do you feel like his background and his upbringing and things that happened in his life had a role in him being a murderer? And yeah, let me know what you thought of this review. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Until next time, bye.